Hello. In the very beginning of this series, we were discussing whether the laws of Shmita, the release of the land, the lying of the land fallow during the sabbatical year, the fruit being ownerless, is a law from the Torah, or a law from the rabbis, Deoraita or DRabanan. And in terms of Shmita's kesafim, it may or may not be connected one to the other. So the Gemara in Gitin, Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, going on to Amud Beis, discusses the Pruesbol, and it says Hillel Hiskin Pruesbol. Hillel established the Pruesbol. Tnan Hasam, we learned. Pruesbol Einu Mishameh. If someone makes a Pruesbol, that the debts are not released. This is one of the things that Hillel the elder established. שראה שנמנעו מלהלוות. He saw that people were reluctant to give loans to each other. ועברו מה שכתוב בתורה, and they were transgrading what it says in the Torah. השמר לך פן יהיה דבר לבבך בליעל, lest there be something disgusting in your heart, and you say karva shnas Shmita. You say the sabbatical, the 7th year is coming, the sabbatical year. And so you decide not to loan. Amad Hillel, the Hiskin Pruesbol. Hillel decided to establish the Pruesbol. V'zehu Gufo Pruesbol. What is the Pruesbol? What is its text? What does it say? Mosrani lechem Plouni Ploni. I give over to you the judges in such and such a place. Shekol chov sheyeshli etzel Plouni. All the debts that such and such a person owe to me, or it could be all the debts that anyone owes to me, that I can collect it whenever I want. And the dayanim sign, or the witnesses. Is it possible that there's something that from the Torah, it doesn't release you from debts? It does release you from debts. The Shvis does release this debt, and Hillel established that it wouldn't. That doesn't make any sense. So how do we explain this? So the Amoraim say, Amar Abai says, B'shviyis b'zman hazeh. We're talking about Shmita during our time, the sabbatical year in our time. For Rebbe he, and this is in fact the opinion of Rebbe. Tanya, as we learned in the Brisa, Rebbe Omer, Zeh Dvar HaShmita Shemot. This is the word of the Shmita, which means release. Shemot, that releases. B'shnei Shmitos Ksum. There are two releases that the pasuk is telling it about. Shmitas karka, Shmitas kesafim. One is the release of the land, one is the release of debts, meaning just like I have to give up my land and it's ownerless during the Shmita year, either God declared it ownerless or I have to declare it ownerless, so too in terms of debts, either I have to release everyone of their debt or God released them of their debts. Bisman she'tamashamet karka, atamashamet k'safim, bisman she'itamashamet karka, itamashamet k'safim. In the time when you release your land, you release the money that's owed to you. In the time when you don't have to release your land, when it's only rabbinic, then when there's no Torah Shmita, then there's also no Torah Shmita of the land. There's no Shmita of the debts. V'tiknu Rabbanan de Mishamet Zecher l'Shvis. And the rabbis said, we are going to establish that the debts are released anyway, so that people will remember the mitzvah of Shmita. שראה Hillel, שנמנעו מלהלוות. Hillel saw that because of this rabbinic enactment, people were refraining from giving loans to each other. Amud v'hiskin Pruesbol. So he stood up and he established the Pruesbol. Mi ika midi d'midoraisa lo mishamet shvi'is. Is it possible that there's something that from Torah law the debt isn't forgiven, v'hiskin rabbanan d'shamet? And the rabbis said that the debts are given. The rabbis are just taking money away from people. What is this, a socialist state? A communist state? Amar Abai. Abai says, shav al taseh. The rabbis are allowed to order you not to do something. Just like in reading Megillah on Shabbos, they said, no, you can't read it on Shabbos. You have to read it before or after because maybe someone will come to carry. They can uproot that. They can uproot any mitzvah they want. They can uproot it by saying, no, you don't perform this now. I shouldn't say any mitzvahs, certain mitzvahs they can do this too. So here, they can say with your debts, don't collect. Rava Amar, Rava says hefker based in hefker. Rava says it's a different principle, that based in is allowed to declare up property ownerless. That's one of the authorities that a proper based in has. Not a self-appointed based in, but a based in with the entire community establishes this is the based in of that community. They have the right to declare ownerless property, and so too they can declare the debts ownerless, and therefore the person that's holding the money, in fact right now, would be the owner of the money. Now, as people have observed in their lives of learning, I assume, Rashi on the Gemara is extremely succinct. However, here he goes to several lines explaining this issue. Rashi says, B'shvis b'zman hazeh, and what is it in Shmita, the sabbatical year in our time? Hillel k'Rebbe svirle. Hillel holds like Rebbe. Damar shvis lahashmatas malve b'zman hazeh DRabanan. The release of a debt at the end of the sabbatical year is of rabbinic origin. Ve'af al gav de Hillel b'bayit shenihu. Even though Hillel was in the second temple, the temple was standing when Hillel was alive. Have a sphere leila Abai holds de b'bayis sheni hoyel v'lo haya yovel noheg. In the second temple, because there was no jubilee year, lo nahag shmitin DRabanan. Therefore, there was no shmita DRabanan. We had this discussion previously that from the time that Reuven, Gad, v'chatzi shevet Menashe were exiled from their land on the other side of the Jordan River, it wasn't Kol Yoshvei Halaha that all of its inhabitants weren't there, since entire tribes were exiled. And at that point, Yovel ended, according to some opinions in the Gemara. So he's holding the sense, Abai is holding that since Yovel no longer existed, then Shmita couldn't exist, because every 50 years there's a Yovel that pushes back the Shmita one year. If not for that, then after the 49th year, which was a Shmita year of the cycle, the next year is a Yovel. The year after that is year one of the next Shmita cycle. So if we don't have a Yovel, the Shmita's off. So we can't have Shmita if we don't have Yovel. V'damrinan ba'archin, as we learned in the Masechta Archin, Manu Yovel is l'kav des Shmitin. We have to count the Yovel to be able to sanctify the Shmita year. DRabanan kamar. He's saying it's rabbinic. Umatzasi but Talmidei Rabbeinu Yitzhak Halevi, and I have found among the students of Rabbi Yitzhak Halevi, who is one of Rashi's teachers, Shekasa b'Maseches Gitin b'Yerushalmi, that they explained from the Yerushalmi on Gitin, Minayin she'ein hashmita no heges ela b'zman sheyovel no heg. How do we know that there is no Shmita at all, except when there is a Jubilee? Shenamar, as it says, Zay Devar Shmita, that this is the matter of the Shmita, Shemot, that it releases. Achash Shmitas Yovel, V'achash Shmitas Shvis. There are two Shmitas, there are two releases, one of the Jubilee and one of the sabbatical year. Avol b'Toras Kohanim, however, having said that, in Toras Kohanim, which is a halachic midrash on Vayikra written by the Tanaim, the authors of the Mishnah, Re'isi Shvis Noheg Bizman Hazeh, I saw that it says there that the sabbatical year applies, Bizman she'ein yovel noheg, even though the Jubilee year doesn't apply. The Omer ani shehu machlokas, and I will tell you that this is a debate among the Tanaim whether Shmita in the second Tekel times was from Torah or the rabbis. So the Rif, and this is also the opinion of the Rashba, the Ritva, the Ran, the Mukhe Yosef, the Rambam, the Tiknu Rabbanan the Tishamet Zecher L'Shvis, that the rabbis established that in our times there is a Shmitas K'safim, there is a release of the monetary debts, so that we would remember the Torah Shmita, that we wouldn't forget that from the Torah debts are released in the sabbatical year. So someone wouldn't say, after Mashiach comes, after the Bais Shlishi is built, he wouldn't say, 7 years ago I didn't release the debts, why do I have to release them now? So that we would know how to keep the Shemitah properly, including the release from debts. So according to these opinions, it seems that Shmita is a rabbinic halacha in our time. Tosfos in Gitin, the same place where we were looking before, quotes Rabbeinu Tam in a very interesting way. V'nira l'Rabbeinu Tam, it appears to Rabbeinu Tam, Te'ashmatas karka dahacha, that the release of land here, v'dahasam, and there, lo ire b'charisha v'zriya, ela b'sados chozers l'balim, b'yovel. It's not talking about resting from planting and plowing of the fields, but it's talking about the fields going back to their original ancestral owners in the Jubilee year. V'hashmatas karka kari liyovel, and the return of the land is the Jubilee. Ulishvis hashmatas kasafim de Shmita mishame des kasafim below yovel. However, in terms of debts, this is every 7 years, not every 50 years, and that's the sabbatical year, not the Jubilee year. Vomer Rabbeinu Tam. I'm not quoting everything. The Tosfos gets back to Rabbeinu Tam, and he says, "Debai sheni nahe yovel." In the second temple, the Jubilee year was kept. According to Rabbeinu Tam, there's a machlokus in the Gemara about this that I mentioned earlier. It wasn't when 2.5 tribes were exiled, but as long as the majority of the Jewish people is living there in Israel, then Shmita is from Torah law. During the second temple times, the majority of the Jewish people lived in Eretz Israel, and therefore Shmita was of Torah origin. Now, according to this, it could be very soon the majority of Jews will live in Eretz Israel, and Shmita could return to a Torah halacha again. I don't want to discuss that more at this time. When Be'ezus Hashem soon the majority of Jews live in Eretz Israel, we can have a full-blown discussion of this issue. So, velo tikin Hillel Pruesbol ladoro. And Rabbeinu Tam says Hillel didn't establish the Pruesbol for his generation. Hillel saw a long time from now, over 100 years from now, when the temple's destroyed, people will not act properly with giving out their money in loans, and therefore, for what's going to happen 100 years from now, Hillel said, I will make this tikana. Shari haya bisman habayis, because Hillel was in the time of the temple. V'Hillel v'Shimon v'Gamliel v'Shimon, and Hillel v'Shimon his son, and Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel ben Shimon, and Shimon ben Gamliel, all of these 4 generations. Nagu nesiusam mipnei bayis meyashana. There is 100 years from Hillel's time through all of these various heads of the Sanhedrin until the temple was destroyed. So since Hillel is well before the destruction of the temple, therefore he says that Shmita in Hillel's time was actually from Torah law. There is more to be said about this, and we will discuss more of the opinions on Shmita being DRabanan or DRabanan or maybe something else in the next year and bring it to a conclusion. And after that, we can discuss more about the Pruesbol. Everyone should have a wonderful day.